Of course. Okay. So we're just waiting for a few more, so we'll just give it a couple more minutes. Because it may be a little harder to find parking. Yeah.
The Casaneo brush, what is that one?
Say that again.
Casaneo? Casaneo?
Yeah, Da Vinci brush.
Ah,
Oh, Da Vinci.
don't remember. Where did I? Which one is the Da Vinci brush?
Yeah, well, you're on your way then.
Is it a genuine Da Vinci?
Wouldn't I like, right?
Gray hair with a brown tip.
Really close.
That was on my list.
Yeah, Da Vinci Casaneo.
I didn't bring it today. But it's got a nice ball to it. So lovely. Yeah.
Rounded, okay.
I have to look back at my list. Thanks, guys. I'll give that actually back to you, but in case anybody wants to have a look at it, that's what it is. It's over there. Come on in. Take your time. Don't worry. I think.
So what do you not use that variable brush for?
What do I not use this brush for?
Yeah, the one you didn't know about.
Well, you know what? The funny thing was I have about 3 of these with all my brushes. And so I try to think of ones that I use that are specifically from here. Because you know when you go everywhere, like this one for example, which one? This one. I actually bought in Spain. But it is the Prado Escoda, and they have them all here. But it just because you were there, right? So you just never know sometimes. This is actually, I think, also a Daniel Smith one, right? Just because I happened to be down in Daniel Smith in Seattle one time. So some of the time I need to use larger brushes, and so I kind of re-put everything that I thought I needed for today, but I have 2 other sets at home right now with other stuff, right? I have one just literally of all small brushes, and I think I only brought 2 small brushes. This one, and the Winsor Newton, this one, which is Kolinsky. And this is the real sable in this one. But if you feel that, actually this is really nice. When you have it, even if it's synthetic, when you have and you can feel it, how nice and soft it is, like the Kolinsky brush, you know that you can get a lot of water in the actual ferrule area, and that's what you want. Because it'll carry on and you're not having to constantly go back and forth. Now this is a 1, but this sometimes acts almost like a 4, because it'll hold so much water in it. So you just have to be careful, but just see what I use this for. It's nice because a rigger brush will also do that for more small lines and stuff like that, and a rigger brush is about that size, but long. And the reason they called it rigger was because it used to do the lines in the mask, right? So that's kind of fun. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11, 12.
It's still supposed to be like 3 people.
Yeah,
I've
so
got a
that's
couple minutes, so
yeah,
really you can start whatever you like.
no
honestly.
problem. I just like answering questions. So ask me some more questions while we're waiting to start.
I must say, I just started painting again a few years ago.
Yeah.
And I have great luck with watercolor brushes, they're great. And they're just middle of the range and they all work. And then when I paint in acrylic, I think, oh, I wish these brushes would work like the watercolor ones.
Isn't that true, right?
Yeah.
Because you probably have more practice with your watercolor, and then getting into a stiff bristled brush for acrylic, and the paint works differently, right?
Yeah.
And now I don't know if you're using paper or canvas, but it feels different when you put it on, right?
Yeah.
It really is much harder. I work with mostly synthetics, and more and more now those synthetics are working just as well as a fiber.
Yeah.
The thing with the synthetic is they will not hold as much water.
No.
So when you end up having to go to a bigger brush to make sure that water stays in there, right? But if you can get it to a nice point, this can be used for almost everything.
Oh yeah.
Right?
I mean,
but if you know that you've got the water in there, you've got more control of moving around. Because I had one student who was using a 6, and when she was using it, she was using Canson paper, and she was going back and forth like this, and not enough water because it was very stiff synthetic, almost like an acrylic brush. She couldn't understand why she was getting all these strokes. Right? I said, okay, just take your big brush and now take some water and go over it immediately, because there's so much pigment there. it smoothed everything out, right? But she wasn't used to, she just liked the small brush, right? And that's one of the things, we might as well talk about it now, even though we're really not started. Every brush has a different style. Some are longer, some are shorter. When you paint, and you're painting close to your ferrule, you will find that you tense up, and you tend to have less free movement. The further away you can get from and feel better, like even standing up, you can get looser and you feel much more freeing on the paper. You'll be a little bit more loose and expressive. So you have to try and feel how that feels on your hand, whether you're left-handed or right-handed, how you can maneuver it. Because the last thing you want is trying to be like a pencil and trying to write. You want to use your whole hand and up to your elbow, because that also can affect your, depending on how big your painting is. If you're constantly trying to get in there, you're hurting your hand, right? It's just like anything. You use too much with a computer, the same kind of thing. So leave your smaller brushes for any fine details, which I'll show you with, this is what we did in the morning, and we're going to do the same thing now in the afternoon, but I can show you some of the details because this is drying now. The other thing is, there's a difference between the round brushes. Come on in, I'm just waiting for everybody to come, so we're just talking brushes right now. Anybody still have that? Perfect. You can, wait, don't throw it yet. Okay, go ahead.
No.
Yeah, take out my eye and then there'll be no class. That's great. Okay, good.
Perfect.
Thank you. Just the one that I couldn't remember. Now, one of you were photocopying something for me, do you think?
Yes, I think I have those.
Oh, great.
Because, Lily went on her.
Oh, thank you.
So I've got more of
Oh,
those.
that's exactly what I need. Because that'll let you see the book brush that I have there. There you go. Come on, pass me.
For sure.
So these are all the things I'm going to be talking
take
about.
one, pass it down. Thank you very much.
And these are all the things you can purchase here if you want to.
Yeah.
And if you notice, on your seat where you just sat down, there was a little thing that says you can get 10% off.
Yep. So there's
that's
a little
important.
demo coupon if you fill out the survey. We always do appreciate too if you have other ideas of what demos you'd like to see. Let us know so we can keep these happening. As well, right now, good timing because we have a watercolor sale up until tomorrow. So all watercolor pads, sheets, watercolor brushes are all on sale right now for 20 or 25% off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you feel inspired, by all means, buy everything on the list.
Exactly. Now, I don't know if you can combine the two, the 10% and the other thing, but they'll
Whatever's
figure it out.
better. Yeah. Whatever better we'll honor for sure.
So it's a great way to try something new if you want to. It's a good opportunity. And they've also put some of the things that I actually have listed down here out there, and it gives you a great opportunity to look at it before you actually go over to the new section that they've got set up now, which is wonderful. You've got so much more light there.
I know.
It's like, wow.
Yeah, it was much
Pretty
nicer making
impressed.
that bit of a reno, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. You just don't know, but now I have to learn it all over again.
Yeah. So yeah, just gonna take a moment just to one, thank Sonia for coming down and doing this demo for sure. You're a very active FCA member.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you also do teaching out of West Van Recreation Center?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
So I think you got classes starting
That's
this
right.
month.
I've already got one. The beginners just started, and there's lots of room. And then I've got two that are starting this next week on Thursdays.
Perfect.
Intermediate and another one. And the intermediate's all full, but the other one is available. So.
Yeah. So can't really do plein air quite yet. Well, we have a cold snap happening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Although honestly, Carolyn and I, did she tell you?
No.
We went to Van Dusen just before Christmas,
Nice.
and we found this warming hut, and we sat there and we painted. They thought we were part of the show.
Great.
It was so much fun. So she was trying out her oils, and I was doing my water. I was actually trying gouache on black paper, because I thought, hey, I can use dark colors, and I've got the sky already done, right? It's not as easy as you think.
No, yeah, it can be challenging for sure.
Because you want to look at everything, right?
Yeah.
It's everything. It would have been perfect with the snow, but everything, all the lights up, and it's just like, where do you start? Some really good things.
Yeah.
So thank you. I really am happy to be here.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll just get out of your hair. You
Okay.
guys have a good time. Have a good one.
All right, thank you. So welcome everybody. The first thing I want to talk about is how I actually came upon this particular picture that we're going to do. So this is actually a little archway in Cinque Terre in the 5th City Fishing Village, and I happen to be there teaching watercolors on Canard cruise ship. In one of the excursions, I got off and went the opposite way of everybody else and came upon this. And it was a beautiful church up above here. So it was just the entranceway was so different. Now this is a little bit of shortened version. There's actually more, but somehow it cropped on my printer. So today I thought it would be really nice to show you some mixing colors of some of these kind of tones of gray, a little bit of light, and trying to keep the whites in this area where the light is coming down. And so in this one, we have a lot of dark in the front here and a lot of really less watered color. So a lot of the pigment is showing in here. And then I've used a little bit of the masking fluid, which I'm going to talk to you about. And then here's our version this morning with a much bigger piece of paper. This was done arches, and this was done on actually a different kind of paper altogether. So the opportunity is, this was done, and this one done is on a Fabriano, which is only 25% cotton. So it was acting a little bit differently on the surface, whereas Arches has much more cotton. And they happened to give me one of the Arches papers here so that I could show you. I'm using cold press. Cold press, it has a bit of a texture to it. And on either side, if you look carefully and feel it, you'll find that one side has a little more texture than the other. 140 pound tends to be the standard, but you can go from 90 pound all the way up. 300 pound would be the much more heavy and almost like a cardboard style.
And you don't have to stretch it.
You don't have to stretch it, and you can pretty much don't even have to have a surface to put it on, right?
Yeah.
And you can also be very rough on it. You can give it abuse, because on 140, you can scrape and things like that, but you have to be careful that if you work with it, you don't pull off some of the fibers. With 300, you've got a lot of wiggle room. You know, you can really press and pull and do all sorts of things. But we're going to try and show you that, because this is all about happy accidents. Yes? Yes. So this being cold press, and I'm going to pass this around so you can feel it, has the texture. Hot press is very smooth. Hot press is wonderful if you want to use ink as well, or pen and ink, because it's a nice smooth edge and you can get a very nice line on there. What happens is, because there's no texture whatsoever, your paint will slip over the paper more. I don't know if you've ever heard of Yupo paper, which is kind of like photographic paper. It tends to slip and move and everything. Well, the watercolor will, on the hot press, tend to do a little bit more of that. But it has some beautiful effects, because you can move it around and stuff. Whereas on a cold press paper, because you have different little bit of textures, the watercolor starts to sink in a little bit, and you get a little bit different variety, okay? And that's why it would be good for this, because we want to have some effects of the rock and the crumbling and things like that. So cold press is excellent. Rough goes one step further. It has a lot of texture to it. And so with a lot of texture, you're going to get a lot of welling, and you're getting a lot of bumps, and you have some really great effects that you can use with rough. But you have also to get used to the fact that there's so much texture, and your brush does different things with washes. Okay? So if that answers your question but you can go all the way from 90 pound. 90 pound you definitely have to tape down, because it will wrinkle otherwise, okay? And beyond that, you just have to be careful, right? What I want to mention is the fact that I use 3M tape, the regular masking tape. Now, a lot of people like to use frogs tape, or even tape that has flowers and stuff on it. You have to be careful with that, because what happens is the color can actually reflect what your colors go onto your paint. And this is more neutral. Even then you find sometimes with a beige that it can be a bit of it will impact you where your colors are, okay?
The other thing is that if you use less than that, it's probably going to pull out.
It can.
Well, I mean, I'm a contractor again,
right?
And these papers, these green tape and blue tape, they're made to adhere less, so they don't pull the paint off.
Exactly.
And so if you wet your paper, you'll find it
tends to kind of buckle, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you actually, because sometimes you want a certain effect, and you can put the whole paper into the water first, so it gives you an opportunity for it to really seize up the water, and then you take it off, you roll it up, and then you put this tape on. Well, it's not adhering because it's still wet, right? So that's something you take into consideration. However, it's just so much easier when you have things taped down, because then you don't have to worry about that rippling effect as well, okay? So, what I want to start with, other than already telling you about where this was taken. What I normally do is I take the picture, the photograph, and I'm going to show you the photograph. I just have to revert to the original photograph here. So the photograph was just around here somewhere. So can you see, you can see that one, can you? Okay, so there's the photograph on my iPad. No, that's not it. Those are teacups. Let's go back. Okay, so there's the photograph on my iPad. And what I often do first is I will actually do what they call a no-tan sketch. And that's reverting all the colors to black and white. But actually, when you do that on your sketchbook, so you would take, and you're looking more at just shapes. So for example, you have your pencil, and I'm just using a graphite pencil right now. So you would take it, I would make up a small picture, and I would just think of the shapes. So there's the archway, that's one shape. There's a bit of the stair, that's another shape. You would consider the bushes maybe just a round oval shape. And that would be basically your, well, maybe the inside of the arch. That would be another shape, another little half rectangle. And so the idea is, if I go in here and I actually edit, and rather than cropping, I go to my colors, I can change the color of my picture on here to black and white. You see that? So that allows you to do grayscale. And that's what a no-tan is, to get your lights and your darks. So I can then look at this and say, okay, this looks dark. This looks dark. And I think this looks a little bit darker on this side.
You mean your iPad can change the color to gray?
Yes. Yes. You go into, there's a little function up here. Let me, if you can you see this? So up here, I'm going to press done. But in your gallery, in your photo gallery, it doesn't want to do this to you, just because I'm not looking at it. You have a gallery of your pictures. If you take your picture and you bring it up, and you press edit, there's a whole bunch of features there. Here are these three little dots on the right hand side above the cropping. If you press that, hopefully, it's going to show you different images on this side in different colors, and it's going to tell you what those colors are. And if you go to monochromatic, you'll get black and white.
What's the name of your iPad?
This is just an iPad Pro. It's just the larger size of the iPad. This is a few years old now. But almost every iPad will have this feature at some level, including how to change colors and write on it and stuff like that. So it's a lot of fun, without even having to do any other program.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you so much.
So now, if I do that, so that's kind of where I'm looking at. There's a little bit of the darkness here on the sidewalk area. So this gives you an idea where you want your lights and your darks. And so we were trying, what I like about this is we were trying to achieve that in the overall composition. I also like, hey, hi, Alice, great. We were also trying to do a bit more of a diagonal, so that gives them a little more interest of light and dark that way too. And so you can see that we had about an hour and a half, which we will have today too. So we didn't get completely everything finished. So I'm going to apply some more here this afternoon too. But there's your little bit of a diagonal there. So you see lighter on this side, darker on this side. Okay. Now, in the opportunity for a little bit of speed, what I did was I actually took my photo. I highlighted my photo. And then I actually put it on a light box, and I drew from there onto the paper. Now, I often do free drawing, but it depends on what time I have. But most of the time, I will actually do a drawing, and then I'll transfer it onto tracing paper. So now, this is very detailed. And the only reason I would do a detailed is so that later on I can go back and I can actually see the details I might want to bring in. Because sometimes you can't see that anymore once you've drawn it, okay? But then what I did was I took this and I put it on my scanner and I made it bigger, so that I can then use it whenever I need to for my students, because they tend to, yeah.
I was just going to ask if I can ask what type of pencil you recommend for when you're doing your sketches, so that it's not showing through the watercolor, or
Okay.
do you erase?
You're one step ahead of me,
Sorry.
so no, that's good. I'm glad you asked. So hold on to that thought, because that's important. So just so that you know, then I took it and I actually put it on a light box, or I often put it on the window. and I just trace over. Now what happens exactly when I just got that question, I'm just looking for, I use an HB, rather than do 2 HB, I use an HB, but what happens when you transfer on there, as your pencil gets heavier, you know, like rounder and rounder because you're pressing in, you end up having more graphite than you want anyways, okay? So what ends up happening is you do get a stronger graphite on here. What do? Let's hope I still have it out here. You use this eraser. This is your gum eraser that you can actually knead and change. And this eraser is different from a normal eraser because it lifts. It's like the silly putty we used to use as kids, right? And if you touch this, it will actually take the lines down to a much lighter line. Just don't take it too far back because it's really hard to find when you're painting later. But this really helps because what happens is it picks up the lines, it doesn't leave any marks, it doesn't leave any shavings, and then when you're finished, you roll it up like silly putty and you go back and you clean it all up. And it becomes perfect again to use. So you
Does
don't.
it make it mucky the next time you use it?
No,
Wow.
which is
What is the
really.
name of this?
It's on the sheet as. You guys have the sheet. It should be number. Where is it? C, I think. Kneaded eraser. C. Okay. So that is really helpful because I tend to go to my Staedtler eraser, and I don't even know. Well, I've got a black one here. When you put these on, you can get some markings on there sometimes. It kind of changes the surface a little bit. And the worst thing for me is my area here, because I'll start and the next thing you know, I have just made this really great smudge. Well, this way I know I can get rid of it. Okay?
I'm surprised that it doesn't, the next time you use it after you
Yeah.
squish it together, it doesn't make it.
Change, right? Because there it is right there, and then it just disappears.
Wow.
So I don't know if it's coming onto my fingers, it's possible, but it's definitely disappearing in the kneading, and it just has that feature. So thank you for asking that, because I mean you can use all levels of graphite. The softer and softer it gets smudgier, right? But you and there's no problem. A lot of people ask, can you use pencil in watercolor, right? Is that defeating the purpose? Of course it's not. It's only how you draw your image on there, right? It's not an issue at all. But you don't necessarily want to see all those lines. In this case, we hardly see the lines at all because the paint is actually, no, I don't even think, here, you can pass this one around. I don't even think you see them anymore. And we got it too.
You can actually erase the lines after you paint it too.
You could. They're a little harder sometimes with the really intense, like indigo and stuff like that, but you can, if you're careful, you can actually go in and you can erase too.
I guess the paint goes underneath the pencil, does it?
I don't know. I haven't found that specifically, but there is one painting I did for a very large painting, and I actually took the pencil lines and graphed it so that I could eventually take it over to the larger painting and know that this is what I was doing in my sections. And afterwards, I thought, well, I can't do anything with this painting. I actually went in and I managed to pull off a lot. So there's something about the adherence of the watercolor into the cotton of the paper, whereas the graphite floats on the surface.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's what it is.
And I got to sell that little test, even like that. It was like, wow, okay, you want it? Sure, yeah, that's great. So yeah, so these are the techniques and some of the happy accidents that you can use to really help yourself with that. So the other thing, go ahead.
Talking about erasers, I like to do watercolor portraits,
Oh, yeah.
and I find, you know, just to get the skin tone just right, you can just erase the paint off. Works really well.
Exactly, and I'm going to show you some of that
Oh, good,
technique.
yeah.
That's important, right?
Yeah.
Because that's one of the fears we all have when we start painting is we're using too much paint. We don't have a way to get back because we're having to save the white and everything, right? But you can take this. If I was upset and I didn't like whatever was on, say that one that I've got going around right now, or even this one, if I really was upset, even though this is dry, I could take it into the sink and I could do this. And I would actually be able to wash 3/4 of it off, believe it or not. It might be a little bit harder because the indigo is so staining, but I could actually do it, all right? Better to do it when it's dry than wet, because for whatever reason, because the paper is actually sizing and it's got moisture in it, you will tend to have an effect. So even if you try and scrub it and stuff like that, when it's wet, you're damaging the paper a bit more than you think. When it's dry, you have more chance to do that, especially lifting and stuff like that. So that's important. Okay, so, and actually you can send that one around too, because I know you can't all see at the back here. So these are a couple of other paintings I had done as part of another class I was teaching. So let's go on from there. So we've talked a little bit about the pencil, and hopefully you have an opportunity to try that out. The other thing is, you do find that if you're on glass and you're pressing, you're going to press harder. So be aware of that, and don't worry, you just have to go back in and touch it up. In effort of time, I already masked some of the area that I wanted to keep white, okay? But there's other ways that you can actually keep this area white, or even this area here that I'm going to keep white. Okay, so the first thing I found that I would use Peebo, or I'd use Winsor Newton, and then I'd try to apply it with something. I applied it with a graphic tool. I applied it with a nib of a pen. I applied it with my favorite, my golf tee. And it's true, right? Because it actually has pretty good point down there. And I would find that I was still not getting a very even, line that I wanted or anything. And you eventually end up having to really work it out afterwards. I did eventually find that this is a really good product. And there are other bottles that you can buy here too that are just the bottle that you put this stuff in. And what it is there's a fine tip inside here that actually goes inside of this to keep it clear. But it allows me, and I'm going to show you, it allows me, don't press too hard, but it allows me to actually keep that line going. And I don't have to apply too much. And I've got a lot more control over it. So there's the Daniel Smith ones out here too, but I couldn't tell whether or not that had the, sorry, I have to go back to my glasses here, that it had this kind of tip to clean it with. If there is another one I just bought, this is also, I haven't had a chance to try this yet. You're supposed to just press it down, and it's got Peebo in it, but there's no way to pull this out. It's just like a retractable pen, but it has that nib, which comes out, and the nib on the side here, which I found, but they don't have it here today. This was something new I bought at the Opus downtown. So I'm just going to show you what might happen if I was doing it that way. It's supposed to just come out like this, but I think I need to shake it a bit more.
So that's masking fluid?
Yeah.
And same with that other one?
Yeah.
Really?
So it's quite interesting, and I'll show just, so yeah, so I have to fess it, and then it's going to come out. I don't know, I find it a bit, it's not really applying a lot here yet. So maybe I have to shake it more, because it seems to have some kind of a... So there's a couple different products that you can find that'll help you. One of the things to note though, because I tend to use Peebo, the gray, because when you're looking, I'm sorry, you can't see one thing here. When you're looking at this, it's pretty clear. And so when I apply it originally, you're probably not even going to see it. So the gray helps me to show you when I'm doing a demo. But now that it's been dry for this, I did this last night, it's pretty, you can pretty much tell that I've taken and put the leaves away, and I put a little bit in the stairs and stuff too, okay? So it just depends. I don't find any difference between the coloring or anything like that. Just don't shake it. Because when you shake it, and I used to always do this, and somebody said bubbles. And then the bubbles go on everything, right? And then you're bursting bubbles and not getting the surface. The other thing too to remember is you don't need a lot of this, and it's so easy even with coming out of here that you think you need to keep that blot there, but you can push it over and use it's. I found that one time I had a happy accident where it came on, I didn't want it, so I wiped it off. Well, there was still enough on there that it didn't cover it with paint, right? So you realize you don't have to use a lot. So that's important to know too. But that takes a little bit of time and just getting used to the whole process. Now, there's other things that you can use to help you not to have to use masking fluid. So the other thing you can use, you can take a piece of tape, and this is something else I just recently learned about masking tape, and you'll know about this. If you leave your masking tape anywhere and it bounces around, when it bounces around the edge, it actually compacts, and that's what causes your tape to actually tear into different pieces like this. So if you can keep, if you can keep it in a Ziploc baggie or something so that at least it has some way of not getting bounced around so much, it'll help to avoid, which we think, it's got to be old tape or something, right? Because it's just doing this to me. No, it's because it's actually jammed around the edges, and that's what's causing it. So now that I've told you that, the little bit that I can, if you want to use this as a way, just like frog's tape, just take it and adhere it to some of your clothing so it's not quite so sticky, and then just put it where you want no white to be, okay? So, and you can shape it too. You can shape it with a knife right on top. They suggest you can cut it up like that. You can even take, if any of you have ever relined your shelving, I can't find my Mac Tack now, you can actually take Mac Tack. There it is. And you can use this, because it's got a sticky surface, and you can apply it to wherever you want. The other thing you can do if you've got a large area, you're doing a large painting, you can take your masking fluid, put it around the edges, cut out wax paper or aluminum paper, and then just put it over top. And it'll seal it around there too. So those are all the things that you could use to actually allow yourself not to have to worry about where your whites are being hidden, okay? And for me, it's all about fast and easy.
Your painting's really flat, not wrinkled. Is that because you're using a tape?
That's correct, because before I made it wet, or even if I've made it wet, I make sure that I actually tighten it with the tape so that it stays there. And that's the best way. You will not have a bunch of, and 140 pound will not wrinkle as much. If you have well, I've never seen 60 pound really, it can be used, but 90 is the lowest I would go. And it will definitely wrinkle. There is another type of tape that I don't know if you've ever seen, that they often in older books. It's brown butcher tape, and then you have to wet first and then you put down. What I found with that is
It's really hard to get off.
you can't get it off, right? So then you go, oh my God, I had this mat that was perfect. Now I've got this brown edge. Like, oh, what am I going to do now, right? So you can use it, but just make sure, it's just like sewing. Make sure you've got your 5/8 of an inch, you know.
So you make it when it comes back off.
Yeah, but you know, you've got to be careful, right? Because it's now you're finished painting, right? So sometimes that's good, because you know what? If you finish your painting, that's another little technique that I haven't talked about. You can go over this all with water now, and it'll just soften it all up.
Yeah.
But you have to be careful that you haven't got a really, like a phthalo blue that's transparent, because that phthalo blue will creep everywhere, it'll blue. So, but it's a nice technique to have, because I don't know if you ever heard of Sandrine Palessier. She's over in North Vancouver. She does a lot of watercolor, but she also does drawing and stuff. She will use that technique to help her smooth out her painting afterwards, and she's put it on her blog. So, there's another tip, okay?
You wipe it over or spray it?
You know, spraying might be better, because then you get a fine mist, but you have to watch that your mist is not too strong, right?
Right.
And that's hard to find too. So it's just give and take, right? Hate brush that somebody asked me about here, that could also be used because it's quite soft, right? But I have found I've used this, and I put I'll show you, because this one is for demo anyways. So if I was to put it on, it's not bad. But I have to be careful I don't get into the white, because it could actually bring some of that color over onto the white, okay? Because it's picked up color. So just be aware of that. So it's like a bamboo, something similar to the Chinese brush painting, but it's a very soft bristle that is really good for putting water on at the beginning of your painting. And we're going to do that right now. The other thing I want to mention before let's just make sure I've gone through everything that I wanted to go through. I think I talked about the tapes. It's hard when you do this demo the second time, right? Oh yeah, what I didn't talk about was the surface that I'm using at the back here. The corrugated plastic. This is probably the best plastic to use because it's so lightweight. And it doesn't take, it doesn't absorb the water, it doesn't get any, it doesn't change. The masonite is good too, but it's heavy. Because I've used masonite for large pieces, just because it's so nice and sturdy. This stuff right here. But it's so heavy. So I prefer the plastic for now. And if you don't want to buy it, although they have it pre-cut here, if you know of anybody who's a real estate agent and you want to get one of their signs, there you go. So there's always
wait for the federal election.
Do you recommend to cover with a cloth or whatever so that you can absorb the water from it, or just on this?
Well, I can put it right on here. Now, if I chose to take this before I tape it down and I actually wet the whole sheet, because you can put it in water, like your tub or whatever, or in a bigger tray, leave it for about, depending on how heavy the paper is, you can leave it between 5 and 10 minutes. Now, when you take that out, yes, I would roll up a towel and I would roll across with the towel just to absorb the extra on both sides of the paper. And then just lay it down. And then it's fine. Actually, you don't even have to do the back. Just put the paper down, roll it over, and that'll absorb the rest. That's nice because it gives you a nice even moisture ahead of time. And so then you can start. But it's not necessary.
And you don't want to put the paper on the cloth thing.
You don't need
instead
to.
of plastic.
And you get a little bit of the fibers around. Sometimes you've got to be careful because you roll the towel over and you think the towel is absolutely perfect. And the next thing you see is this little red thing.
I mean, underneath.
No, you don't have to worry. No. And actually,